So last week we discussed in preparation of Mirz Hashem for this Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur. We're in now Parshas Nitzavim. We had Parshas Kisava last week, now Nitzavim Vayelech, Tavshin Ayin Zayin. And I think that these two Parshios really work hand in hand very nicely towards preparing us for the Yom Noraim for Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur. As we discussed last week, B'nogea to Parshas Kisava, we discussed mostly Bein Adam L'makom, the responsibilities, relationships, and attitudes that a person should have in general, and especially in preparing himself for the Yemei Adin for Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur. We discussed both the tremendous Ahava as well as the Yira component that come together that we should try to work on, think about. We discussed some practical suggestions as well towards increasing that feeling of Hakaras Hatov, of appreciation to the Ribono Shalom for what we have, really thinking about something specific in our lives, and using parents, especially those who take care of us and raise us, as an amazing mashal in the Gashmiistika world towards expressing appreciation for what they do for us, and thereby helping that serve as a bridge. Well, intrinsically that's a good thing, but also it should serve as a bridge towards allowing us to feel and recognize the appreciation we should have and hopefully will have and do have towards the Ribono Shalom. And that's all Bein Adam L'makom and the different facets of the relationship that we have with Him. I want to discuss tonight for a few minutes Bein Adam Lechaveiro, the other components. So this is part 2, preparation for Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur. The Bein Adam L'makom aspect of our life is just as important as the Bein Adam Lechaveiro is just as important as the Bein Adam L'makom. You can't have one without the other. They really go hand in hand. And Parshas Nitzavim serves as the perfect starting place for such a discussion, because Parshas Nitzavim opens up. The Mefarshim explain, you're all standing here. The Mefarshim explain either here or a little bit later in the Parsha that this is the bris, this is the establishment of arvus, of the fact that we're all arevim, kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh. What is an arev? It's a guarantor for the loan. It's somebody who guarantees payment for the loan, so to speak, when it comes to mitzvahs and averos that we all do, that Klal Yisrael does. We are all guarantors of those mitzvahs, doing those mitzvahs and staying away from those averos for each other. Kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh. There are Kabbalistic sources that I've heard about. I can't say I really know too much about, but ideas that I'm sure we've all heard from time to time regarding all of Klal Yisrael being one body, and it's all affected, therefore, by different things that happen to one part of the body affects how the other part of the body feels, etc., as a mashal. And so, Kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh. What better place to start such a powerful message in terms of the Bein Adam Lechaveiro attitude we should have. In fact, somebody who's purely selfish by nature, let's say, still should thereby care about what happens or what is going to happen with his friend, with his fellow Yid, with his fellow Jew, because of this concept of Kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh. Obviously, we want to strive to get to a point of really feeling, being able to not just sympathize, but empathize. That means being able to really put yourself in your friend's shoes and feel the difficulties that he might be experiencing, but also feel the high times and the good times that he might be experiencing. We want to get to that madrega, be able to really be there for a friend, selflessly, but even from a selfish perspective, Kol Yisrael arevim zelazeh establishes a necessity to look out for your fellow Yid. Because we ourselves are connected to his responsibilities, to his chiyuv. It's an amazing concept, and it shows how closely connected the individual members of Klal Yisrael are with each other. I think really it is through achdus, it's through unity, that really, when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, which is being mamlich the melech, as we discussed last week, the proper being mamlich Hashem is really only through that aspect of achdus, of unity. If we're fighting with each other, whether it's individuals fighting with each other, or it's factions within Klal Yisrael fighting with each other, and we lose a sense of respect for each other, because let me be clear, there are two types of fights. I could have my opinion and you could have your opinion. Just because somebody else puts on Rabbeinu Tam Tefillin and I don't, that doesn't mean that we lack achdus. the fact that we might have disparate mahalchim in a sugya, the fact that we might conclude differently lahalacha lamaisa and do minhagim or certain aspects of halacha differently, does not mean that we should chas v'shalom lose respect for each other. We respect the halachic process. We respect that there are multiple ways to go through that halachic process. And when you're dealing with rabbanim and talmidei chachamim, who are yarei shamayim, who are emistika people that want to know the truth, you can come out with different conclusions within Torah in specifically how to manifest that particular halacha. That is not a contradiction. That is a whole discussion in of itself. How Hashem actually made Torah Shabbal Peh purposely in that type of structure where you can have machlokasim. Very famous common question is, how could we know that the Torah Shabbal Peh is true if we see machlokas come into it? And there are many answers to that question. It's a different shir that I certainly touched on last year. We can devote one night specifically to that question, to that topic of the Mesorah of Torah Shabbal Peh. It's good for you to know, by the way, that there are many, many multiples times agreements throughout Shas than there are disagreements. One quick example. Let's say we have a machlokas in Hilchos Shabbos. Right? So how many agreements do we have until we get to that machlokas? A machlokas, whether there's borer on this object or not, in this situation or not. First of all, let's work backwards. First of all, we agree that there is a malacha called borer. That's an agreement. Second of all, we agree that there's something called lamitas malachos. We agree that there is something called isurei malacha. It's also Torah Shabbal Peh, learned out from the Pesukim. Third of all, we agree that, now okay, we're already getting to the Torah itself, but third of all, we agree that there's Shabbos altogether. We agree when Shabbos is, what Shabbos is. We agree about so many aspects of Shabbos and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. But we have a very specific machlokas that comes out in the Tanoim or the Amoraim in one malacha. Okay, and we have many. I'm not saying there's only a tiny amount of machlokasim, but you should know for every machlokas there are many, many more times agreements in the halachic process. So that's just one important thing to recognize. It's a vast majority of agreement throughout Shas and a minority of machlokas. But Hashem purposely built it into the system of Torah Shabbal Peh that machlokasim can arise, and as long as you follow the system that Hashem set up for us, then both conclusions are the correct approach for that Rav, for that city, for his Talmidim. And therefore we need to respect that process. If we respect that process, which is Torah, then we should lose not an iota of respect for one person who does something different than us, since we both got to our conclusions through genuine Talmidei Chachamim going through the genuine halachic process. So that's not what I'm talking about when I talk about a lack of achdus. No lack of achdus there. Lack of achdus means real losing respect for the other person, real disparaging remarks, feeling ill feelings towards the other person. That's what we want to avoid. Fakir, we want to increase the love that we have and the respect that we have for each other. When we come to be mamlich amelech, when we come to establish the kingship of the king, imagine first you have multiple groups of people making their own unique types of celebrations. Well, in what venue? If it's all under one roof, but each faction has a different favorite color, let's say, and so they all create a room with that color, all part of this global celebratory festivity for the king, that's beautiful, and it in fact provides diversity. In fact, it's really a mashal that I'd save for a different topic when, well, we talked again last year already about the idea of doing with your potential what you should do in life. Many times in high school you're already thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And really it's very early to be able to know. But one thing you can know is that the Ribono Shel Olam gave everybody a different set of talents, a different mixture. Every single person's set of ingredients combined creates a different mixture from the next person. And Hashem wants us to all be doing different things. Some of us to be doing different things within Klei Kodesh. Some of us to be doing different things not in Klei Kodesh. Hashem wants that. The mashal that we find is to the king who wants a garden planted. And so he tells them, here are the options of flowers to plant. So the 10 gardeners that he hires to make this garden all look and see that the red roses are the most expensive, most precious flower there. So they decide, let's all plant the red roses. So they all take red roses seeds. They all plant in different sections of the garden red roses. The king comes back sometime later to take a look at what's going on in his garden, and he sees just a whole huge bunch of red roses. And he tells them, this is not a garden. This is a red rose store. Anybody who wants to come buy red roses, come to my store. You're missing in the beauty when you only plant the red roses. And really the way that he wants it is there should be a section of red roses, and it should be surrounded by some violets, and it should have a circle of tulips around it, and it should have many different types of flowers all around the garden. That actually gives it beauty. And variety provides that beauty. Without it, it actually becomes less beautiful, more bland. And the Rebbeinu Shalom wants that in the world at large. And so it's actually through the different factions of Klal Yisrael, in the different ways that we have minhagim, in the different ways that we come to our conclusions in the halachic process, but through the genuine emistika approaches that we provide that variety and that beauty to Yiddishkeit, to the Torah, and ultimately to being Mamlech Hashem. But if we are in real arguments with each other, real disparaging, disrespectful arguments with each other, then that's like each city deciding, let's not be under one roof. Let's make one small celebration in this city, one small celebration 100 miles away in another city. What kind of a celebration is that for the king? It's so much more grand if everyone joins together in one city, each in their own way, bringing their own talents and their own unique traits to the celebration, to being Mamlech Hashem. Each individual bring his own talents. And then each small group, and then each faction, and then the whole Klal Yisrael, all under one overall roof. That's the greatest way to be Mamlech the Rebbeinu Shalom. So it actually takes away from us as Klal Yisrael being able to properly give that kavod, give that honor to the Rebbeinu Shalom on the day that we pronounce him king. When we have those machlokim, that's why Bein Adam Lechaveiro, I think, is tied to Rosh Hashana and then ultimately Yom Kippur, that day that we, after being Mamlechim, come so close to him for that time of tremendous kapara, forgiveness, and getting even closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to the Melech Malchei Amlachim. So Achdus is crucial. Obviously, we sitting here in this room, 11th grade Ner Yisrael, we're not going to be able to change or have much of an impact on factions in Klal Yisrael. But we can train ourselves to work along those lines, and there's no lack of opportunity here within the confines of the yeshiva, of your grade, of your shir, of the dorms, of your room, of the floor, etc. There are many individualized groups within the group of the yeshiva that you're a part of. And there are many, therefore, opportunities to actually enhance Achdus. A couple of practical ideas, simple practical ideas like we gave last week when it comes to Bein Adam L'Makom. Here we have Bein Adam Lechaveiro. How about going over to a boy? Most of our lives we live, let me say this introduction, most of our lives we live on autopilot. What feels comfortable and what we've gotten used to, we do. There's not much thinking to do something new that we wouldn't have otherwise have done. It's just generally how human beings function, and there's advantages to that. But we have to always be reassessing. Maybe there's something more I can do here. How difficult would it be for every single person in this room, over the course of the next week or two, to find a person that they've said probably just good morning to, or hello to, or something short to and nothing more, and go over to that person and just start up a conversation? Awkward? Not if you do it subtly. You don't have to say, hey, what's going on? Yeah, as if you talk to him every single day. Of course not. That's strange. But you go over to the person and you say, if he's in your shir, you have a great opportunity. How did you understand Rebbe was saying this svara in shir? How did you understand what Rebbe was saying this in shir? Yeah, now you normally would never ask him because you have your group of 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 guys that you go to and you speak to. You don't need to go. Who cares if you don't need to? Who cares if you don't need to? You're establishing a greater level of unity by just going over. And how much time and energy does it take? You discuss one svara and shir with him. Even if you never talk to that guy ever again the rest of the year, still, one time you made an effort to expand your relationships a little bit, to make him feel good a little bit. Obviously, it's more valuable to go over to a guy who it seems is not already involved in many different groups of people and seems to be a very popular guy. Even those guys, it's worthwhile to expand and connect between groups of people. And certainly with guys that seem to have less friends and are less popular. It doesn't mean that the guy is necessarily even sad by it. He's very content with the 4 friends that he has. That's normal. That's healthy. It's fine. But you want to go and expand a little bit. And the idea here is not that you should become best friends with him, but that might happen. It's great. It's just to expand who you talk to every once in a while, not just your own little group. It creates, if many people do that, it creates an overall atmosphere of friendship, of inclusivity, as opposed to exclusion, and achdus. So important for life in general, ultimately for being able to be a good husband, to have a good marriage, and to raise good children. It teaches selflessness as opposed to selfishness. It's all part of what you guys can train yourselves to become now and establish these healthy habits for life. And certainly now in the context of being Mamlech Hashem, Rosh Hashana coming up, it's an important thing to do. Second practical tip. How about, and this is something that I would hope, I don't even need to say, and maybe you're all doing it, but I'll put it out there. If you do ever see in the dorms or in the building one person being mean to another person, you hear it, you see it, don't just stand by. It takes very little to go over to the person giving the verbal abuse to that other person, say, hey, come on, stop. You don't have to be all fire and brimstone against him and start quoting Musar Sfarim and trying to get him to cry or anything. You just say, leave him alone, it's cool, don't worry about it. The guy who's being attacked will see you're there for him. If, and this is a big if, but if you're really worried, genuinely worried, and there's truth to the worry, that you're now going to become the victim if you do that, sometimes that is the case. If you're worried about that, at the very least, watch from a distance, and when it ends and the guy leaves, go over to the guy who was just viciously attacked. Put your hand on his shoulder and just say, I saw what happened. That was totally not cool. I really wanted to intervene. I wasn't sure how to do it, but that was really not cool. You know, if you want to talk about it with me, you're welcome to. Would you like to go with me to someone to speak it over with an authority figure if it's really something that's continuing? Show him that he's not alone. That is a basic function of feeling for your fellow and not just living in your own safe, little isolated world. And most people have been at one time or another on the receiving end of something somewhat mean. And so we can all feel those feelings and feel the pain, empathize, put yourself in the shoes of that guy. Not just sympathize, meaning, I feel bad, I wish it wasn't happening. That could be selfish. I wish it wasn't happening, it's making me feel uncomfortable. If only I was elsewhere at this time. That doesn't help that guy who's the victim. Empathy means putting myself in his shoes and feeling, whoa, if I was him, I'd feel terrible about what just happened. Let me just express that to him. Hey, I noticed what happened. I feel terrible. What can I do? How can I help? Etc. Don't just stand by. Don't just walk by. If you're able to get together a group of guys who notice something like that going on, then even more so you can approach the guy who's the abuser, the person who's being mean. And you can go over to him as a group and say, hey, you know, you could always start with a compliment, really say, you probably don't mean to do it, you're generally a nice guy, but fill in the blank. It's always a better way to do it than just going right up in his face. So, but the bottom line is, don't stand by. Again, you can create a culture and an atmosphere of inclusion, not exclusion, of we look out for each other. And if you do that now within your grade, within your shir, within your room, it's a trait, it's a midah, it's a habit that you can establish that is so healthy and good for life in every circumstance of life moving forward. It's a wonderful preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Just want to contrast this idea with another idea. While we talk about inclusion and love and being like one big happy family and all that, we have to recognize that there are many influences from society that we have to stay away from. So there is a little bit of a balancing act where we want to try to, at times, be very loving and inclusive and open-minded to hearing what everyone else has to say. And just because I already established my understanding of the Gemara, let's say, I still want to understand what you have to say and really put my understanding aside to hear what you have. But at the same time, do I want to be open-minded? Okay, to understand another viewpoint, yes. But if you're not understanding it and it seems a little off, you don't have to bend your reality to make it work with what someone else is saying, just because they're saying it. And there are many opinions out there nowadays, more than ever before in society, that don't have rational basis for it. The Ramban says on this week's Parsha, the Pasuk says, Laman Sfos Harava Satzmeya. Basically what that means is the satiation, the being satisfied will overcome the thirst. It's a little bit of a cryptic Pashat Pshat Pasuk. The Ramban says what this is referring to is that when people steep themselves, when a human being steeps himself in the depths of taiva. Let's take taivas achila, the Ramban says, for example. He goes and he gets the best food. And then he realizes, oh, a new restaurant opened up in town. I should go get food from there. And then he says, no, an even better restaurant. But now it's a whole different thing. It's food from Africa. Let me go get food from there. And then there's a new takeout place that opens up. I have to try all their stuff. Don't get me wrong. Food could be, again, like I discussed last week, a wonderful form of self-reward and relaxation. On Shabbos, there's be'etzem a mitzvah to eat it even during the week, to eat good foods even during the week. It's something that can help rejuvenate us, like we discussed with certain forms of entertainment that are clean, as we discussed last week. They can be good things in life, something to embrace. That's what Judaism is all about, embracing the wonderful physical things we have in this world towards allowing us to have energy, rejuvenate, be happy, healthy people, to be able to raise up in levels of ruchnius and building ourselves as people. But if a person really, it's just an unmitigated, relentless pursuit, that's what life becomes about, the latest and greatest food, let's say in this case. The Ramban says at a certain point, the person will develop a taiva to eat dirt. Now, what does that mean? And he actually brings an example, but what does that mean? A taiva to eat dirt? Why in the world would he want to eat dirt? It tastes bad. And the answer is because you begin to get bored. It's just the nature of physicality. That's why you're always looking for the newest, because you get bored. And if you already basically tasted everything, then you're going to get bored of everything. So you got to look somewhere else to satisfy that taivas achila, even if it's something that initially you would have never dreamed of indulging in. It would have been something that you even thought was disgusting. Now, becomes appealing. Let me try it. I'm not going to fully subscribe to what I'm about to say because I personally do appreciate dry red wine to an extent. I'm not a wine connoisseur. But I know the Rav of my shul in Monsey who doesn't appreciate dry red wine at all, and it's like a little bit of a fancier shul. So the older people in the shul have these wine and cheese little social gatherings, and he's the Rav, he's a young Rav, and he's invited to come participate in these wine and cheese parties, social gatherings at a fancy, clubhouse or something. And he says, literally, all these people are like tasting these really old fancy wines and these like little cubes of extremely old cheese also, very old cheese. And he said it tastes like I'm eating, right? The wine and cheese tastes like I'm eating dirt and diapers. For any of you who've ever tasted very fine, dry, aged wines, many of them are complemented based on their earthy tones. The bottle will say it has certain cranberry and raspberry and earthy tones. Now, what does that mean that the wine has an earth tone to it? It means it has a little bit of a dirt taste. They just won't write dirt taste. That doesn't sound good on the bottle. So they write earthy tones. Sounds much better. But there's something to that. There's something to that. It's interesting. And the Ramban himself talks about that example. And the cheese also, I don't really have any experience with that at all. But apparently the cheese, to those who are not accustomed to it, can smell or taste like some pretty nasty stuff. But you develop a taste, as they say. There's a famous Jewish comedian who once said, yeah, these fancy people all say you have to develop a taste for this and develop a taste for that. Nobody ever had to develop a taste for potato chips. So that was his little quip on that. Anyway, bottom line is that when you indulge in taivas to the extreme without any self-control, you end up actually developing taivas beyond what you ever would have imagined, even something that could have been disgusting. And that certainly can be applied to what we see in the world today when it comes to Mishkav Zachar. And we see that there seems to be more of a push than ever in the public domain more than ever in modern history. And I can't tell you exactly what was going on in Roman and Greek times. But in modern history, more of a push than ever in the public domain towards it being mutter and towards it being a way of life and all these things. And one could argue that it goes hand in hand with the relentless, unmitigated pursuit of taivas nashim that goes on and went on for years and years. And now we're seeing products of that manifest in, well, what else is there out there? And actually it develops a taiva for something that you initially thought was disgusting. There are unfortunately forms of exposure that sometimes kids have to different types of inappropriate materials that initially when they see it, it's disgusting. It's not just, oh, I shouldn't be looking at this. It's disgusting. That's the initial emotional response to it. But that withers away quite fast if you keep looking. And then it becomes like there's a taiva for it. It's an amazing way in which Hashem made us and how that initial feeling goes away and then the taiva develops to something that initially was disgusting to us. Important thing to think about. We could extend this, by the way, to even those rare circumstances where perhaps, as Rav Aaron Feldman says in his famous letter, that maybe there are rare circumstances where a person is really born that way. It's really born with that taiva mishkav zachar. We could say that that's actually a product of the fact that when the world itself embraces a new taiva, the genetic fabric of the world can change. We find that already in the times of Noah, where the animals were mating with each other, min b'she'eno mino, different animals that normally would have, what happened? The human beings changed the fabric of the world by going beyond what was normal for their taiva, developing all sorts of new taivas, that the world in general became corrupted. And more intrinsic creations of the world, like the animals that normally are pre-programmed much more than human beings, they don't have bechira, came out born corrupted. And that we could potentially explain some of what is going on in our society like that. Of course, just to complete this topic, it's important for you all to know in the hashkafic perspective of that taiva, even in the rare circumstance that a person really is born with that, and that is really rare. The fact that a person has a fleeting feeling or something like that is not this at all. But even in the rare circumstance where a person's really born like that, it is never something that he can therefore act on. And if somebody asks, how is it fair that I should be born that way and I can never act on that taiva? How is it fair? Yes, there's a whole discussion we could have about how the Ribbono Shel Olam does lots of things that initially seem unfair, but in his ultimate cheshbon, it's fair. I mean, the person who has cancer over there, the person who lost a child over there, all of that lo aleinu, chas v'shalom, do they have harder lives than you, or do you have a harder life than them? We could argue, right? So it's not like something unique to you. Hashem gives really hard nisyonos to certain people. I don't know why, but I know he has a cheshbon. I know there's a reason. I just don't know what that reason is. So when that happens, it doesn't mean that you can act on it. That's your unbelievably hard nisayon. But it's doable for you, to the best that you can, like any nisayon. Okay. Main point that I'm making over here is that society at large has many interesting opinions out there that not necessarily should we be saying, oh, let's accept every opinion out there within our purview, within our construct. Again, hearing things out and thinking about them and being open-minded to analyze, of course, we should always be. But we have a right to use our rationale and our logic, and of course our God-given Torah, to make decisions about certain things. So while we try to stay away from society when it presents something corrupted, otherwise it's fine, but when it presents something corrupted, we stay away. At the same time, when it comes to within Klal Yisrael and things that go together with our Torah values, we accept, even if they're slightly different from the way that we do things. We maintain that level of achdus that's so important. We have in this week's parsha, Bacharta b'chaim l'man tichya. Choose life so that you will live. And with this I'll conclude. Choose life so that you will live. Of course, if you choose life, you'll live. It's very repetitious. You know, when you take a fish out of water and you place it on the floor of the boat, it looks like, if you just take a quick video snapshot of that moment, it's having the time of its life. It looks more alive at that moment that you plop it down on the floor of the boat than it looked even in the water. And the water was swimming around, very nice. Here it's dancing and flopping all over the place. It looks like it went to the club and it's dancing, having the time of its life, but really it's dying. Dying rather quickly. Those are the death throes, not a dance. Sometimes it's hard for us to see what's life and what's death, what's good and what's bad, what's giving us a more achievement-filled life, a more productive life, and what really is taking away from that, what's deteriorating our lives. It's difficult to see sometimes. Emotions get involved, taivas get involved. The Rebbeinu Shalom saying, choose life that is this Torah, Laman Tichya. You will see. You might not see right away, but you will see. You'll live. You'll really feel the life of Torah included in that life that we want so much to develop and to take advantage of. Take the opportunity is both what we discussed last week and this week. It's Bein Adam L'makom, that both Ahavas and Yiras Hashem, we express our appreciation for Him. We recognize the severity of our Averos. We love and at the same time fear and are in awe of Him, as well as connecting, feeling love for our fellow Yidden, being open-minded, being accepting, not standing for anyone, chas v'shalom, being bullied in any type of way, being there for others, taking the message of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zel Hazeh. Through those two pieces, we can come to the most unbelievable hamlacha of Hashem, establishing that kingship of the Rebbeinu Shalom through such appreciation for who He is and what He does for us, and through appreciation for each other, uniting together, maintaining our individuality, but at the same time coming together under one roof, to be mamlechim, to accept each other through love for each other and respect for each other. We come to the greatest level of being mamlechim. And Mirz Hashem, this Rosh Hashana Yom Kippur, we should be zocheh to come to that madrega, to come to that level, to do that with those attitudes and thoughts and feelings. And through that, we'll all have a kasiv v'chasim tova for us and all of Klal Yisrael. And we'll be zocheh, Mirz Hashem, already this year to have both Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur in Yerushalayim Habnuya with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'meher V'Yameinu Amen. Have a great Shabbos.